So this past week, NASCAR and Netflix introduced the second season to their documentary following the sport and in more particular, the playoffs. And in NASCAR Full Speed Season 2, I have to admit, I had a bit of intrigue seeing how they were going to go about things. But I also had intrigue about how they were going to push different stories, all of the other stuff we knew going in. And so what I want to do today is I want to talk about briefly each episode, or at least points from each episode, with as little spoilers as possible, just so that if you're wanting to watch it, I don't spoil some of the cool things about it too much. And also, if you want to show this video to somebody to try and talk them into watching it or something, I'm not gonna maybe spoil stuff for you. So let's get into it. I left notes for each of the 5 episodes, and starting with episode 1, I'm going to say this: it is full on NASCAR for dummies, NASCAR 101, whatever you want to call it. It is very much explaining everything, getting the viewer kind of just into the groove of what NASCAR is, how the regular season is, what the drivers are like, some of them character wise, stuff like that. And I will say, you will know whether or not you want to continue on watching this series within the first half of the first episode. I think that it's very much going to set the tone of what each episode will be like, how dramatic it might be or overly dramatic, what the storylines would be, who they'll follow, all of that. And there were 3 drivers that really stuck out in this episode: Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, and Daniel Suarez. Joey Logano, listen, you might hate him, comes off incredibly likable in this. Great family dude, all of it. What you think of him on the racetrack, so be it. Ryan Blaney oozes with coolness. The dude is the coolest guy in NASCAR. It is no contest whatsoever. He's cooler than your favorite driver. And they really hammer this home a lot in this episode. And I'll say Daniel Suarez, with the position that he's in, with both the team, performance, playoffs, all of it, you really, I think, see him as the most endearing driver of all of them. And they explore that more in the later episodes as well, and his personal life, what he's had to go through, everything like that. And I really appreciated that. But this first episode very much is not going to be covering as much of the racing. It's going to cover the drivers, their lives, their families, all of that. The second episode starts to hammer into the racing itself, and each of these episodes, for the most part, takes a round apiece. First round with the second episode, then third episode gets the second round, fourth episode gets the third round, and the last one gets the finale. And with that, the second episode does start to hammer in how these drivers have to adapt to the playoffs, how they have to adapt their lives, how their lives normally are. Chase Briscoe was the big one. Him and his wife, Marissa, are having twins. They're getting ready for it. And one of the things I will admit that me as a diehard fan, I learned from it, and there weren't too many things that I didn't know going in that weren't about the personal life, but mostly about the racing side. But one of the things that, slight spoiler here, I didn't know was that basically if Chase Briscoe was at the track on a Sunday and his wife went into labor, he would be told he'd had to stay. And so there was a 1 in 7 chance that he could have missed the birth of his twin children, which I think is huge. It really elevates the stakes of what this all means. It really hammers home the sacrifices that not only the drivers have to make, but their families have to make. And I think that in a lot of ways, you can really, I think, latch on to somebody that has that kind of passion. And a few times I talked about, the balance of family compared to racing. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys valued racing at this time over family. And so that was something that I think I really latched onto. And maybe it's also because I'm about to become a dad and I have that emotional attachment to all of it. Sure, so be it. But how many people that don't watch the sport that you might know could get that attachment to it, whether it be that storyline, whether it be, Suarez talking about his dad and not being able to see him for 6 or 7 months at a time, and all of that, or the family life of the other drivers that are in there, like Joey Logano getting ready for a marriage, like Ryan Blaney. There's so many things personally that you can really latch onto as a diehard fan, but that new people especially can take a lot to. Also, I really like that Suarez and Harrison Burton had a light put on him. Harrison Burton as the lame duck. And what I loved is when they talked about it with Jeff Burton, he very much was like, tough shit. Like, this happens to everybody in life. We get dealt bad hands, suck it up. And I think you'd use a lot more of that mentality, both in NASCAR and in general. Also, the Suarez side of it too. His perspective of not being up to the performance that his team or he expects him to be. Having that chip on his shoulder, something you can latch on to. The third episode gets a little bit more serious. Of course, they do actually cover a little bit of the lawsuit. They kind of gloss over it a little bit. It's really Marty Smith that keeps bringing it up. It's like, he'll be sitting there and he's like, they have Michael Jordan as their owner and Denny Hamlin. So there's that pressure with Joe Gibbs helping them out, and they're suing NASCAR. And I'm like, all right, Marty, after the third or fourth time you tell me that, I get it. They're suing NASCAR. Of course, the Briscoes having their kids, all of that. There's a lot of more serious personal stuff and behind the scenes stuff here. I can't say, though, that anyone really stands out, not only in this episode, but in general. I'd say the closest you can get is probably Christopher Bell or maybe the Penske guys. And that's just because you see him in more episodes. There's not really that standout guy like Denny or the 2311 group like there was last year. So there is that. And I will say that once you get into episode 4 and you start seeing the drivers and the families and everyone just getting pissed about what's going on, feeling like they're screwed. I mean, that stuff I think is really good at selling just how much these guys care, whether they say they do or not. And this episode really leaves on a cliffhanger with the controversy at Martinsville. And I will say, as somebody who knew it happened, as somebody who knew exactly what happened, and as somebody who has documented coverage of this on my channel, go back and you see all live streams after the races, I was still left curious for the next episode. I knew what happened, but I was curious of how they were going to talk about it, how they were going to cover it, and how they were going to try and kind of push through it. And once they got to the 5th episode, the finale, they kind of just glossed over it as like something that happens in sports, happens a normal amount, stuff like that. And this is the point that I want to kind of talk to a lot of diehards going into it. There's going to be a lot of people disappointed with this because they didn't nail NASCAR to the cross and hang them and string them up. But this is partially a NASCAR Productions thing. NASCAR was involved in the making of this. They're not going to be throwing hardballs at the sanctioning body, at the format, at any of this. In fact, they defended it a lot, which is really funny, as now they are talking about making a new one, have a whole committee and everything for it. So it's going to be really interesting how they cover that next year and the year after. But I would say, if you're expecting some grand critique of the sport, of things you don't like, this is not the documentary for you. In fact, I would argue to a degree this isn't the documentary for diehards. If you're a diehard, you know pretty much everything on the track, and you know a lot of the personal stuff if you're a diehard fan of each guy. This is more or less just some supplementary information for you. This is very much for your normie parent or your friend that's kind of interested in NASCAR a little bit, or a sibling that wants to connect with you on it, stuff like that. Watch it with somebody who doesn't know anything, and don't tell them anything at all about the sport, about the controversies, about the storylines, nothing that you haven't already talked to them about in the last year, and see what their reaction is. I'm very curious about that. I would say, and this, before I get to the final episode, this is very much where I'll say I recommend watching it with somebody who doesn't know a damn about NASCAR, because I'm curious to see what their investment would be and if they would want to watch a race from this afterwards. This is very much for somebody who is not going to watch every week without some kind of push. So going into the final episode, like I said, they gloss over the controversy for the most part. They really focus on Christopher Bell and how he felt cheated, the behind the scenes, the reaction of him and his wife, as well as the Penske duo that made it. Those three are pretty much the main characters, if you will, but that's only because they're in the most episodes and they have the most coverage put on them because of how far they got. And they show the agony of defeat, they show the spoils of victory, they show all of that in some pretty good detail. If you want to see that side of it, this is definitely what you should watch. But I would say, overall, this is the most inoffensive, just normal PR pull of a lever push that you can give to somebody that NASCAR looks the best way possible in it. And we all know how 2024 ended off, but I would recommend it still. just because it's interesting to see from the perspectives of those who are involved. It's interesting to see from the behind the scenes of stuff you don't get to see of them in their personal lives, stuff like that. I do recommend it. Very good production. And I wouldn't personally as a diehard watch it again. But I would definitely show it, say, to my wife, who doesn't watch as much and would learn a lot from it. I would show it to my brother, who doesn't watch much, or to friends of mine who have talked about going to a race but never have really had that push to do so. That's really the main gist of it. So if you've seen it, let me know in the comments below what you think of it. If not, go watch it and then let me know, or let me know what somebody that you watched it with had to say about it. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel for more great and fun NASCAR content. Thank you so much to everybody for your continued support, including my members especially. And until next time, have a good one.